My name is Lieutenant Colonel Rolland T. Olson. I was born in Minnesota, above a bank. My dad was a banker in White Rock, Minnesota, and I was born above the bank. And then subsequently, in later years, when I was about 5 years old, we moved to Zumbrota, and my dad was a farmer, and I was raised as a farmer boy. I went to school in Zumbrota, graduated from high school, and I worked for my uncle a few years, and then I got a job as a Greyhound bus driver. And I was working with a Greyhound when the war came along, and I enlisted in the aviation cadets and went to training, became a pilot, and then I went to transition into a B-24 bomber, became a bomber pilot, went to Boise, Idaho, and trained my crew. And I had a very, very good crew. We graduated from that training school as one of 3 top honors. That's awarded a brand new B-24 to fly overseas, and went into Africa and then into the boot of Italy, where we started to fly missions. And of course they took my brand new B-24 away from me and gave it to the general, and then I got an old bomber that somebody else had used, and we few missions and got shot down on the 25th of July when we hit the Herman Goering tank factory. I lost 3 engines, and we made it back south towards Yugoslavia on 1 engine, where it was necessary to bail out my crew. And by the time I bailed out, it was about 200 feet left, and I landed on top of a roof, and I broke my fall, and I was lucky because I jumped off of the roof before my parachute collapsed, and I landed right in the pig pen right next to a sow pig nursing her small. Well, there were guns pointing at me all over, and they finally took me, and I got a little beating up from the civilians until the military or the home guard came along and rescued me. And then I was captured, went into interrogation. I had 2 crew members that were free for about a week, and they kept me in solitary because I wouldn't tell them how many crew members I had and what their names were, and so on and so forth. And I was in solitary confinement until they caught them, and then one day they called me in. They said they found who the other 2 guys were, and then they put me in. I was interrogated and finally wound up into Stalag Luft number 1 at Barth, Germany, as a prisoner of war. And I was there then from July the 25th until the 30th of I think it was the 30th of April or the 1st of May, when the Russians came through one night and flattened the fences down, and 7 of us got together, and we walked out at 4 o'clock the next morning. We didn't want to stay there any longer, so we walked out, and we were on the road for about a week. And then 2 of us finally met the British one day on a road, and they took us back to a house that they'd commandeered, a 3-story German house, and there was a Russian colonel there, and he had a woman pounding on the piano, and they were celebrating with the British. And now 2 Americans showed up, so we had a tri-services meeting. And the Russian colonel, he thought that was great, but he made me drink some vodka, and that didn't go good with me, and I finally got sicker than a dog, and the British called an ambulance, and they hauled me to a hospital in Hamburg. I spent the night there. I was very sick, and the next morning the nurse says, well, there's a truck will take you to the airport and fly you to England. I jumped right out of bed, got on the truck, and we wound up into England at Stone Hospital there. And I was spent about 2 weeks there at that hospital recuperating, and then they finally released me, and I was in London for a while, and then they made me commander on a LST in charge of 130 enlisted men that were coming back to home. And so it took us 2 weeks in an LST to reach Newport News. And there we were at Newport News until we were released and went to St. Paul and discharged, and then we had we went to Florida and was reassigned, and I stayed in the reserves for a while. And in fact, I stayed in the reserves and earned my retirement in the reserve program. And that's about all I have about the story on the missions and so on and so forth. Back to the period when we were in the prison camp. Once we were interrogated, of course, you get into the prison camp, and then your senior officers were the commanders of the camp, and the commander of our camp was Colonel Zemke, and Gabreski was also there. So they were really the managers. And a day in camp was, you'd have roll call. We had a roll call by the Germans morning and night. And then we'd have a breakfast consisted of maybe some barley or black bread. The food was kind of skimpy. And then during the day we would just simply lay around or walk around the compound and talk about these things. So at night we had to have lights out. And I remember we used to have some candle and we played bridge at night. And another guy and I won the bridge contest in our compound. So that was kind of interesting to spend them. And also, my navigator, Howard Ray, started a school. And during the day, we would go to school. I took a course in accounting, law, and a couple of other courses, and we did get a little education while we were in camp. And after the war, I was married during the war, and I went back home, and we settled down, and we had 2 children. I have 2 nice boys, and they're doing very well. And so I was in the automobile business after the war, and then I worked for the federal government, and I have retired as a federal civil service employee, as well as I have a little income coming from the reserve retirement plan. So, okay, comparing my period of growing up with the young people of today, I am concerned as to the discipline that they have in today, connection with the military. It seems as though that in my day we had a better respect for the military than I find today among the young people. And I'm deeply concerned as to what the attitude of the young people would be today if we were forced to have another world war. It's a big question in my mind as to what would happen. Would the young people volunteer like we did way back in the 30s and 40s? In my mind, that's a big problem, and I think that we need to build the military and a little bit more discipline and education of for the military. They should have a better respect and have more interest in the military, in my opinion. So that's about all I can say about that.
The chestnut trees, the wishing well, I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be